do not want it on. I do not want it on. It's fine. I'm a dark person. Okay. Yeah. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Control Room. It's July the 2nd. Am I getting any audio? Looks like it. The Control Room hotline number is activated for Control Room Gold Line members. I am Joe Pasevich. This is kind of a bare bones program for July 2. Since we are in summertime mode, we're doing fewer live shows, but I thought it was sort of important to get out here today in light of past events, recent events, and just run over, do a very basic recap of what has happened over the last week or so. As most of you know, there has been some buzz around an executive session that was held at Town Hall back on Monday. To add to all the other stuff going on, with basically a restructuring or reorganization of our town government, which cannot come fast enough or soon enough, in which there is a lot to be done. Is that working all right?
Yeah, I'm just going to turn you up a little bit.
Okay, good.
You're on number 1, just a heads up.
Thank you. Yeah, I am on 1, right?
You're on 1, and then your video's over here.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Heather. I hope you're having a good summer. Everything looks great for the 4th of July. The weather looks great. It's this typical warm, muggy weather for July. I hope all your gardens are going well. I was working in my garden for a couple of days this past week, and I have a real hard time keeping up with it. Man, the weeds are just so prominent, and the old expression, things grow like weeds, you know. But there's one particular weed that's got like a very pointed tip, serrated leaf, compound serrated leaf, and it's got the foliage has a very pungent odor to it. If anybody knows what this thing is, and it grows like 4.5 feet tall, and it has a very thick, developed network of roots. And man, you got to do pick and shovel on it to get it out of the way. But anyway, like I said, I hope you're all doing well with that. So take time to enjoy it. It's therapeutic, it's helpful, it's all that stuff. Plus it helps feed you. So one of these days I'm going to play the old clip I made years ago of what I called the override garden. When we were being threatened and were subjected to an override here in Marshfield back in 2007, you know, I began promoting the idea that it was necessary now to plant your own food and get your own livestock, basically, because of not just the cost of living going up, but with the cost of taxes. And nowadays, taxes for most people on your property is more than your mortgage. And utilities on top of that are also outrageous. That's the breaking point for a lot of people that are caught in a vice right now when it comes to being able to afford to stay around here. And the number one thing that has to be, that we can all do as a town, and what your officials can do for you, is to find a way to relieve the burden on you. Whether it be a reduction in the CPA tax, or trying to hold the line on real estate taxes. And I know Eric Kelley has been talking about the need to explore a possibility of holding the line at least for a year on real estate taxes. I know that he's been talking to the town treasurer and other people about seeing what we can do to hold the line on real estate taxes at least for a year, and potentially try to do an underride. In other words, every municipality is entitled to do a 2.5% increase in their debt tax levy, real estate tax levy across the town, plus new growth. So we've had so much new growth, and that includes everything from putting in a new door to remodeling your kitchen, putting an addition, building new houses. That's on top of the 2.5% increase in local tax levies that are allowed under state law. So typically in Marshfield, your tax levies town-wide go up over 3%. because of the 2.5% increase allowed under the Prop 2.5 state law, plus the added new growth to the tax base. Yeah, I mean, look at the budget. Look at the revenues that the town had. Look at the amount of free cash that we've been having the last few years. Enormous amounts of free cash, which is embarrassing to the insider regime, because then they have to find a way to spend it. Because if you see how much free cash there is, my opinion, I express a lot of political opinions here. That was one of my majors, by the way, but anyway. I express a lot of political opinions here because that's how I evaluate the scene, no matter what it is. Everything's got a political angle in this town. But yeah, they end up with so much free cash, it's almost embarrassing. And then they have these articles at town meeting where they start handing out tranches and gobs of money, $250,000 for the police department, $500 for the school department, $500K for the school, $150K for this, $600K for that. And it goes and it goes and it goes. And how many people actually get up at town meeting and say, excuse me, what is that $250,000 allotment for? And then always, somebody from whatever department is supposedly getting the money gets up and with a sour look on their face, typically, oh, well, why are you asking? And they're always they're always stingy with the details. It's just like when we had budget discussions this spring, and it was in the budget that $900,000 was being set aside from free cash into a reserve account. And I asked the question, what's a reserve account? Oh, that's money for bills that we think might crop up during the year. Well, how do you get the figure 900,000? And I had to request information on that. I finally got the information a couple weeks ago, and I haven't been able to digest it. Pardon me. I'm trying to work for a living and take care of family matters and myself. So, hey, I'm not a full-time ombudsman or watchdog for the town, as many people think that I am. Go to Joe. He's the one that'll ask the question for you. Go to Joe. He'll stick his neck out. How many times? Go to Joe. That's okay. He doesn't mind being arrested. No, that's not true. There are things that motivate people to be engaged civically, but one person can't do it alone. But that's another topic for another show. Anyway, so, stay involved and don't be afraid to ask these questions. Don't expect Joe to ask these questions, all right? You got to stay involved. And that goes for everybody and whatever side of the political spectrum you're on, all right? I encourage everybody to ask questions. Anyway, so going back to what's happening lately. First, I want to start out. Jack Griffin is a good guy. He was on the Capital Budget Committee. He ran afoul of the insider team while he was there. But since then, since the last 5-6 months, he's made his presence a little more known, and he's developed a talent for putting together commentary. And here's a commentary letter that he wrote. Just came out like 2 days ago. Dear citizens of Marshfield, I write to you today with deep love for our town and hope for the future we can build together. Now, he admits, Jack, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think some of this is AI generated. Everybody uses AI to assist in their writing nowadays. Marshfield has always been more than just a place on a map. It is a community of good people bound by shared memories, hard work, and the belief that this town should always strive to do right by its residents. Yes, our town government has faced challenges recently. Change is never easy, but with every challenge comes an opportunity to learn, grow, and build something better. Where have I heard that before? Here is where we stand today. Stephen Darcy, a polished and experienced board member, former Cantwell campaign worker and manager, was arrested for DUI in Duxbury in April. Since then, there has been no public discussion from him or the board. And his case has been delayed a couple of times in court. And now I think it's been put off until August or something. Accountability matters, especially from those who lead us. Last select board meeting, Darcy called for a reorganization of the board. As you recall, in this earlier on after the election, there was a reorganization of the board, and Kelley was named the chair of the board. And Eric Kelley nominated Darcy to be vice chair, and Trish Simpson, the newcomer, took on the role of clerk. But Darcy, sensing that there was some discontent or dissatisfaction over how a couple of meetings had gone, alleging that it was all Eric Kelley's fault. What a surprise that they would go that way. He called for a reorganization of the board in an effort to return to the role of chair. He lost that vote. Eric Kelley remained in the role within the 2-year experience given to all, without the 2-year experience given to all select board members, making the leadership transition even more demanding. Typically on a 3-year term, you get to be the chair when you enter your 3rd year on a board or committee. Or if you're on a 5-year term, you get to be the chair on on your 5th year, if there are 5 members, for example. Anyway, so yes, I think for Eric Kelley to become chair in the 2nd year, as it would be for anybody to become chair in the 2nd year of a 3-year term, is creating a challenge. I can tell you that being on the Housing Authority, it took me quite a while to get familiar with the basics of the operation, which is a slow process when you're dealing with a state agency like the DHCD, now the EOHLC. And the complex spiderweb myriad of regulations and procedures and guidelines and bulletins and various requirements of the board, man, I'll tell you, I've talked to Housing Authority members in other parts of Massachusetts, and they say, like, I've been on for 5 years and I still don't have it figured out. It's really tough when you're having to deal with a huge set of state regulations, okay? And there's also a dynamic to a housing authority. You're dealing with tenants who have various concerns and needs and other requirements. And there's a real dynamic there you have to try to understand. So it is a challenging position. However, anyway, our longtime administrator, so Eric is doing a great job considering where he's coming from. Now remember, Eric Kelley spent the 1st year as a select board member, and I'd ask Eric sometimes, how did it go? I would say, how did the meeting go? I noticed you talked about this agenda item here, there, and there. I said, did you get that information? I was just asking as a concerned citizen. And oftentimes I found out that Eric Kelley was out of the loop. And this was a regular thing. I don't know how he was able to get through some of these meetings. And I don't know how he got through some of the meetings when he was constantly being talked down to and suppressed by Lynn Fiddler, who was the chair during his 1st year. Remember Lynn Fiddler saying things like, hey, hurry up, there's a game on tonight? I mean, Eric Kelley was abused from my perspective, watching what was happening. I mean, wow. I mean, you would hope the 1st year went a little more smoothly, and that the board that's in place, the members that are in place ahead of you, would help to educate you and inform you and bring you along. But with Eric Kelley, I can tell you, it was the opposite. Now he gets put into the role of chairman because Steve Darcy, let's just go with what Trish Simpson said, he should not be chair, even though he was in his 3rd year of his 2nd term. He should not be the chair because of the way he treats residents. And I agree with that. The way he treats me, the way he treats everybody, the way he comes to meetings with a script almost, with canned questions and responses to almost everything. And some people call that being polished and well prepared. I don't think so. But anyway, so Eric Kelley has had a tough row to hoe, and I give him a massive credit for what he's been able to do. And he's also a person who's principled, and he has an approach to doing his job. And his basic approach or credo is, I don't want anything done behind the scenes. And when I learn something, I want you, the public, to learn it. So he's probably a little bit too zealous when it comes to open government and accountability. But what a refreshing change from what it's been for over 20 years, when every board elected seems to have been selected and always votes in unison. All the votes, almost always, unanimous, unanimous, unanimous. No discussion, no background, no questions. Oh, Mike, you're doing a great job. Our administrator, let's hear it from Mike. Mike Maresco, oh, the board is wonderful. You're doing a wonderful job. One hand washes the other. That's what you lived with. Now, do you want to go back to that? What's better in terms of government? Oh, but the meetings aren't going fast enough. I'm used to turning on the TV and watching a crime solved in 30 minutes with a happy ending and then rainbows and unicorns and, snowflakes coming from the sky. No, government is not fun. It really isn't. I mean, it can be tough, and he's doing a great job given the situation. And we still have hostile members within the administration, I'm afraid to say. Our longtime town administrator, Mike Maresco, parted ways with the town earlier this year through a, quote, mutual separation agreement, one that included severance and non-disparagement clauses. What's important to remember is that this decision was made under the previous select board, where Eric Kelley served as the minority voice. Sometimes I think he still is the minority voice. Something major happened, enough to cause the abrupt and quiet end of a long and prominent career. The public deserves transparency and a full understanding of what led to that departure. Eric Kelley, now chair, opposed that severance package, just like Eric Kelley opposed the chief of police's new contract, not because he's against the chief, and Mike and Eric, I know, was not like a, what do you want to say, virulent, angry, anti-Maresco person. But he has a problem with some of the compensation packages that we're seeing. When the top salaries on the South Shore are going to police officers and police chiefs, when the top salaries are going to administrators in school departments, when the top salaries are going to certain town administrators, and the gap between these top paid positions and most of the rank and file and middle administrative positions is so great in some instances, that's a reason to take a closer look. Is it wrong to ask questions? Why are we seeing these salaries? Is that wrong? Should I be afraid to ask any question I want to ask? Does that put a mark on me? Apparently it does. Eric Kelley, now chair, opposed the severance package. Whether you always, he's taken stands for transparency and accountability even when it's placed him alone in the vote. I'm one of 5 on my housing authority board almost all the time. I do not feel like I'm in a hospitable environment. I sometimes feel like, and it's just, I could say the sky's blue and they would disagree. In a situation where you're in a group of people that is like diametrically or politically opposed to you for whatever reason. So people have been in that situation. I'm sure anybody out there has been in that situation. Whether you always agree with him or not, his willingness to ask hard questions has shown integrity. And it certainly has. Integrity above everything else. The contract for longtime town council Bob Galvin was renewed this year. Kelley and others questioned whether it was time to open the contract to new proposals, but after public comment largely favoring Galvin, there was a string of people that got up and said how wonderful Bob Galvin is. Maybe he is a wonderful people. But I know from watching how he's done business in town that I would be in favor of replacing him. I just don't agree with him, and I don't agree with some of his methods. And I think we need somebody fresh in there and somebody more neutral from the outside, preferably. Even so, many residents still want to see clearer oversight and discussion when it comes to legal spending. Police Chief Tavares faced a public accusation of harassment and to his credit, insisted on an open hearing. Okay. The town showed up. The town, all right, showed up. Hundreds of residents stood in support. After testimony and discussion, the select board dismissed the complaint. Chief Tavares faced the community with strength and humility. which I do not agree with that statement. I do not think Chief Tavares faced the community with strength and humility. But we'll get more into that in a minute. It says, after testimony and discussion. What testimony? What testimony? Was the complaint letter that generated this executive session, public session, ever discussed to any significant degree? No. The basis for the executive session was not the topic that carried through during that so-called executive session. The basis for it was touched upon, but the meeting was hijacked and taken over, and the narrative was changed to take attention, resulting in taking attention away from the complaint and the basis for it and what actually transpired on Monday night. That is the issue here. The complaint was never addressed. And the hundreds so-called people that showed up, I would bet you dollars to donuts that a small fraction knew what it was about. All they saw was I think most people, all they saw, and I don't know how people would have seen it because it wasn't publicized, the so-called, the letter, the complaint letter written by yours truly, it wasn't publicized. It wasn't put on a town hall website. It wasn't seen anywhere. People just showed up saying the chief is under attack. The chief of police is under attack. You got to go and support him because he's wonderful. Now, I'm sure, I've never had an issue with Chief Tavares that I know of. I've always been neutral. I've always given him credit because he seems to be hiring good people. And we've had, in my opinion, in my observation, had some nasty cops on the Marshfield force in the past. Nasty. Like really should not be here. As in, go paint houses or something like that, which is an admirable profession, but it's not being a police officer. So do something other than being a police officer, which is an extremely demanding job. Nowadays, you got to be a psychiatrist, a therapist, a negotiator, an arbiter, a marksman. You got to have a sixth sense about things. It's very demanding, and that's why there's always all kinds of stress-related issues with a lot of people that serve on forces. I know. In my family, state police, local police, border guards, FBI, I've heard it all. So hundreds of residents showed up, and the chief faced the community with strength and humility, which is just, Jack, you didn't write that. That must have been AI generated. Let's also be honest about something else. Kelley was elected by a majority of the voters. Calls for recall do more to divide than to heal. We've seen this before. Back when Maresco himself faced pressure as a selectman, he was on the recall talks about town. The louder voices of opposition can sometimes drown out the real needs of the town, but government here should not be a reflection of national party lines or personal vendettas. It should reflect our shared goals, our shared home, and our shared respect. Oh, you really? That's why whenever people like me got up and asked questions at town meeting or at individual board meetings, we were like regularly, consistently, heavily, vehemently denounced as anti-government, venom-spewing naysayers who have too much free time on their hands, or lots of free time on their hands. And every variant of that description that you can imagine. Hissed at. People sticking their legs out to trip you as you're walking through an aisle at town meeting. Sworn at. Hate mail generated. I remember a hearing with Mike Maresco when we were talking about spending $3.5 million on a roofing solar panel related project. And I asked questions about the procurement process and how this number was arrived at, getting into the details. What was the response I got? Oh, it's Mr. Pasevich again, dealing in misinformation. I cannot remember the number of times I was assailed and assaulted and denounced and derided and insulted over asking questions. It's a regular thing in this town that I've experienced for over 20 years. When I was fighting the Beacon 40B, I was a NIMBY. I was a racist. I was just looking to hear my own voice and see my own face. I was just looking for publicity. The truth is I was in it for the chicks, okay? Unbelievable. The sleepless nights, the stress, which led to a heart condition, which took time away from my son. When I was arrested after that incident at the middle school in 2010, and I was brought to the police station, they had me on video saying, when do I get to call my friend so my son can be watched out for when he gets home from school? When I was put in a jail cell in Marshfield, in a freezing cold jail cell with a noisy fan for I don't know how many hours. And I said to the police officer who had arrested me, can I please call a friend because my son will be getting off the bus? He said, it ain't gonna happen. And I have a propensity for lying, by the way, after being through all this, when a lot of this is on tape or on video somewhere. I'm the one that's the bad guy. I'm the one under attack. I'm the one with the dedication to civic engagement and involvement in holding government accountable, along with lots of other people that came before me, like Pat Bean, George Shaw, Rusty Tremonti, Jimmy Cipolo, in his more active days, Barry Cornwall, so many other people, Madeline McDonald, Jim Creed. We're the bad guys. In the midst of this, Trish Simpson has stepped in and been a stabilizing force. Since taking office in May, she has brought professionalism, kindness, and a deep respect for town employees and citizens alike. She ran on the mantra or the slogan that I don't like the way people are being treated in this town. I hope that includes what happened Monday night when I was subjected to just outrageous accusations and slander. Now, as we move forward, we cannot ignore the biggest issue facing Marshfield today, our budget. The town has serious financial challenges ahead. The Volk school obligation, the costs are rising, revenues are tightening. Not really. They're going up over 2.5% per year. The problem is not the revenues. The problem is the spending. The big salaries, the outrageous salaries that we're seeing in all those positions I just described a few minutes ago. This is not the time for distractions, infighting, or political theater. It's time for responsible leadership, community input, and most of all, fiscal discipline. Yes, Jack, spending. We need to focus on essential services, identify cost-saving opportunities, and reduce our spending wherever possible. There are lots of people that are town employees that are getting gypped right now, and lots of other people that are looking at $200,000 plus per year pensions and with benefits. Every household has to, and that's not counting what they're getting paid now. Every household has to budget carefully, and the town must do the same. Marshfield is resilient because of its people, because of you, because of your involvement, because of your temerity, because you've got the guts to ask questions and to report wrongdoing. What we need now is more transparency. What have I been saying for over 20 years? Because trust is built on openness, true accountability. When I got into the housing authority, I said, where's the money? How much do we have to work with? Why aren't our meeting notices being posted properly? And it got me into so much hot water, they had tried to impeach me within 2 months. Remember that? Me sitting in the hot seat for 6.5 hours, being grilled and insulted, having all kinds of crap made up about me and thrown at me. That really turned some heads and opened some eyes. And I'm not afraid of it because there are people that are standing by me, that call me, that give me a hug, that give me support, and it's going to continue. The accountability mission is going to continue. What we need now is more transparency, the experts who keep our town running, true accountability from every official, including department heads, people who keep our town running, community engagement, and more conversations, more listening. Not shoveling it behind the scenes like so many things I've been told were done in the past by high up insiders. They would say to me, Joe, everything used to go to behind closed doors into Mike Maresco's office. That's what I've been told by a very high official. All right? I'm a journalist. I can ask questions of people, and I can report things here to you. I'm a private citizen. I'm a journalist. I happen to be elected to the Housing Authority. Does that take away my First Amendment rights? Think about it. Every dollar matters. Let us learn from the past. Let's not lose sight of what really matters. Let's move forward with patience, with grace, and with hope. Marshfield's future is still bright. If we lead with unity, not division, with truth, not silence, and with love, not fear. I believe in this town, I believe in its people, and I believe that together we can build a town government because that's what needs to be done right now. Build a town government. We have a ways to go that reflects the very best of who we are. Have a great and safe 4th, or in Marshfield, 3rd of July. Everybody have a wonderful 3rd of July and a wonderful 4th of July. Remember, you know, a lot of people say that it's so bad in this country right now that I'm going to move to a foreign country. And I've lived in other countries. And they're beautiful. And the people are wonderful. The food, the activities, the landscape. But they don't have what we have. We have the United States Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. We have Thomas Paine, Ben Franklin, Jefferson. We have amazing, amazing foundation. Common sense. We have amazing foundation for this country. Nobody else in the world has what we have. We have to take that and we have to use it and we have to live it. All right? I know people that have moved to Russia, like whole families, and they just say, oh, it's wonderful. And we practice our religion, we do what we want to do, we eat well, the air is clean, the water's pure. But they don't have our Constitution, which is the last best hope for us. So celebrate it this 4th of July. Remember why you're celebrating the 4th of July, okay? It's not a TV show. It's recognition that this is where we live and this is where we're going to stay and this is where we're going to die. And we're going to leave it a better place than it was. Anyway, one other thing I want to throw in just for a tidbit, which might get referred to later on. I just printed this out. Quote, like rats fleeing a sinking ship, a history. An idiom that goes back centuries. The idiom, like rats fleeing a sinking ship, used in reference to people abandoning an enterprise once it seems likely to fail, has shown great linguistic tenacity, having been in regular use for over 400 years. 400 years. However, the wording and form of this standby has changed quite a bit over the centuries. Almost all the early uses of the sinking ship analogy were in reference to political scandals. The original setting for the fleeing rats was a decrepit house, one that was on the verge of falling down. Both rats and mice in the 16th century were said to have the ability to know when a structure was on the verge of collapse and would accordingly decamp sometime before this happened. By the early 17th century, the behavior of rats begins to see us use a don't suffer, use a, oh, this is like goes on, another habit, another meaning. Something that the rationale spirits, oh, there's some quotations that refer to rats fleeing different situations. Given that and then it gives about 14 or 15 examples of where that phrase has been used for the last 400 years. Given that the continued existence of rats in failing enterprises, political and otherwise, appears to be as likely as that of death and taxes, there is a strong likelihood that this expression will continue to inhabit our language in decades and centuries to come. However, when we see how much it has shifted over the past 400 years or so, it is less certain what the future forms will be. perhaps like rats disinvesting in a bear market. So it's very common, it's very old, and it's used to describe a failing enterprise or a failed endeavor. It is not used to describe people individually. Now, the incident that happened over on the Monday thing, the Monday session, was written about by WATD, by the Patriot Ledger. It appeared in other online news services. It appeared in hundreds of posts on social media. And I can tell you that all of those news stories that you see either online or Patriot Ledger or WATD, not one of them has spoken to me. Not one. There was one journalist that I did have a relatively short conversation with about this, and that's Christine Hill of Duxbury Substack. That's it. But everybody else, including the Patriot Ledger, which wrote an extensive article on what happened on the proceedings of Monday night at the Select Board, not a mention, not a call, nothing. But I want to say one thing about this a couple of things about this Patriot Ledger article if you haven't seen it. At one point in the article, early on in the article, they call it a fiery back and forth between Marshfield's police chief and Select Board chair captured the attention of a packed Select Board chamber at Town Hall on the evening of Monday, June 30th. This was written by Hannah Morse of the Patriot Ledger. At least that's the byline. Now, we know that these writers don't always write these things or are responsible for the final version. The editors determine what goes online or out to the public, whether it be here or ATD or any place else. You got to remember that the editors have the final say. The board met to discuss Chief Phil Tavares' reputation, character, physical condition, or mental health after Marshfield resident and elected Marshfield Housing Authority board member Joseph Pasevich filed a complaint against him. The agenda item was not a disciplinary hearing, interim town administrator Peter Moran noted. Ultimately, the three-person select board voted 2-1 not to further investigate the complaint, with Chair Eric Kelley being the sole dissenting vote. The discussion lasted roughly 40 minutes. Now, here's an important next line here. The genesis, quote, the genesis of the exchange was a comment made by Pasevich on his local access television show called Control Room. That's what they say was the genesis of this exchange. Incorrect. The genesis of this advertised executive hearing, then public, not hearing, executive hearing, this executive session, the genesis of this executive session, which became a public session, was the complaint written by me. The genesis was not a comment made by me on this show. That's important. That's not the genesis. The genesis, the reason for this executive session was a complaint issued by a citizen, not by a housing board member, and not by, as they say in the next line, Pasevich, who has unsuccessfully run for a number of local elected offices. Get it? You see how they write these things? Going to the end of the article, the attorney that was there helping Mr. Tavares, Mr. Dunlap, who also works for the fraternal, what does he work for? He's a counsel for the Fraternal Order of Police, says, quote, the entire proceeding was procedurally irregular from my perspective, Dunlap said. His name is Dunlap, Scott Dunlap. Quote, for the town of Marshfield not to analyze this, give it some scrutiny before calling an immediate selectmen's executive session is irresponsible. Could there have been another route to have looked at this issue, which was the complaint? It wasn't Joe's show. Could there have been another route? It's an interesting question. But in the meantime, when a complaint usually runs into the select board, what I understand always happens is that somebody takes a closer look at it. In other words, they call it an investigation, call it what you may. In other words, the parties that are involved will be interviewed and the information from the interviews and other fact-finding will go onto paper. Then the select board, without pressure of 100 people screaming and yelling and swearing and clapping and whistling in their faces, gets to read it calmly in a quiet, safe environment and develop some conclusions and ideas. So from that point, yes, Mr. Dunlap, you're right. It was procedurally irregular in more ways than one, in my opinion. That was the big mistake. Eric Kelley and Trish Simpson had never been through this. I think Mr. Galvin and Mr. Moran probably had been through this. And in my viewpoint, the select board should have been given more guidance. In that room, after the 6th or 7th interruption with swearing and gestures and noise and whistling and intimidation, should have been cleared. I remember once I was at a meeting where Lynn Fiddler was the chair, and they were talking about the Housing Authority ballot for the spring election, like who's going to be on the ballot to run for Housing Authority. And at one point I said, "Excuse me, may I say something?" No! Because there should have been a race for Housing Authority this spring. There was a vacant seat. Not a vacant seat, but a seat that was up for re-election. No! But I'm a Housing Authority member. I'm authority on this because I've studied it. No! And then Darcy, you may think you're an authority, but you're not. You can't be interrupting. So what does Lynn Fiddler do? She takes out a protocol letter, and it says, if a person disturbs a meeting, they will be given a warning, and after the second, they will be asked to... Where was that Monday night? Why didn't town council or the town administrator step up to defend the integrity of the process and the procedure and say something? Why were they silent? Think about it. Why were they silent? I think Peter Moran might have said something when one guy said F you or something like that. I was watching, and I was working late, honestly. And what indications I got was I was not welcome at that meeting, which was a shame because there were so many things said that were inaccurate and incomplete. So that's that. And here's my complaint letter. A short time ago, this was written on Tuesday morning. Now, I was on my way to church and to go visit my son at 8 o'clock in the morning on Sunday, a week ago yesterday. And my phone rings while I'm driving down the highway. I don't really like to talk on the phone too much when I'm driving down the highway. At 8 o'clock on a Sunday morning, I get a call. This is Phil Tavares. I'm calling on a recorded line. Okay, what's this about? What? I don't get many of those calls. Then on Tuesday morning, 2 days later, and during that so-called recorded call, I said, I really don't want to talk. I'm on my way to church. I don't know if I said I'm behind the wheel, whatever. I don't remember saying that. But it's like, this is not the place to talk. When I see you, Phil, and again, I haven't heard the recorded call. Supposedly it was going to be played at this meeting on Monday. It wasn't. Maybe Trish Simpson heard it. Maybe Eric heard it. Maybe Steve Darcy heard it. I haven't. I was like, when I see you, I'll talk to you. No, it's not now. I didn't say call me on an unrecorded line. I don't recall saying that. Why would I say that? To me, it would be better just to see Phil Tavares. You have to retract what you said. What? What did I say? Whatever I said, I'm not talking about it right now. I'm going to church. I'm in my truck. I'm not thinking about you. I'm actually praying. Am I entitled? Am I allowed that? Try it. I get another call Tuesday morning. This is Phil Tavares on an unrecorded line. Later on, Phil Tavares admits he had people in the room listening to the call. But that's all he said. He never said, I've got people here with me. Retract your statements. You lied. You lied about what happened to you in Pembroke. I investigated it with the deputy chief over there. She never pulled her gun. What's that got to do with what I said on my show that you're claiming is a big problem? What? What is this? So I let that call go on for 4 minutes and a few seconds. And I said, well, I've got nothing to retract. Well, you said I was at the Plymouth courthouse. Well, yeah, I saw you there. Maybe it was your doppelganger, but I saw you there. Now, I will say this, add this on this tonight's show. I did not pay attention to Phil Tavares after that moment where I saw him. I don't know if he left early. I don't know if he stayed. I don't know if he ran after the verdict. I didn't even see him after the verdict. So I don't know what he did. But the reason why it made an impression in my mind, which I will reveal right here now, is that I said, why is Phil Tavares here? I had seen him around town. I had heard about him. Seemed like he was a good guy. He had a very impressive story of rising through the ranks and overcoming family challenges and the things that life throws at people. I said, why is he here? He didn't arrest me. I don't think he was involved in the investigation, or if there was one. That's odd. I mean, he's a good guy. I think he's a good guy. What's he doing here? Later on, I said, well, I guess maybe that's just what's required of town employees and members of the department, you know. The blue fraternity, all that kind of stuff, you know, stand up for each other, whatever. I used to hear stories about that from a relative who was in the FBI, a relative who did some work with Secret Service and stuff. The things that these guys do for each other and watch out for each other is amazing. That bond, it's sometimes too much. Sometimes it can be corrupted, as we saw with the Karen Reed trial. Obviously, there was problems there. But I said, why is he here? And it stuck in my head. Like I said, maybe it was his doppelganger. But yeah, I saw him there. And then there was Jim Robinson, who was reported to me, said he was afraid I might be found innocent. So the atmosphere was there. The previous history of harassment and being debased and insulted and criticized and attacked was there already. So why wouldn't I believe that these people were like just gleeful over the prospects of seeing something bad happen to me? That's what I fully expected from them. That's how they had treated me all the time, before then and since then. When has a town official ever said to you, if you're asking questions, good job? I think I saw it once. And it wasn't a town official, it was Jim Cantwell, when a woman spoke at a town meeting, and he recognized what she was speaking on was an issue that he was familiar with. And he went up to her, put his arm around her, let's set up an appointment, let's talk. That's never happened to me, not once. So anyway, that's what happened with regards to the court thing. I didn't lie about it. There was no lie there. There was no reason to recant or retract that. There was no claim of a conspiracy theory. None of that. So that was part of what happened on the telephone call on Tuesday. In addition, well, I'll read what I wrote. The caller ID indicated the Marshfield Animal Shelter and as the source or origin of the call. The caller identified themselves as Phil Tavares, and they were calling on an unrecorded line. I believe this was a reference. The reference to it being an unrecorded line was in reference to the Sunday call, which was described to me as a recorded line. That's where I said that. And that Sunday call came in on my phone, on this phone here, and it said, 837-6655, the business line, please. When I got the call Tuesday, it said Marshfield Animal Shelter. On this phone, it was on the screen, Marshfield Animal Shelter. Tuesday's call, or this morning's call, as I wrote from Tavares, can only be described, and the Patriot Ledger article has this quote in here, as starting out somewhat slowly but rapidly escalating into an off-the-rails rant laced with threats and proclaimed plans to incite and encourage the public to go after me, including having everyone file public records requests about me. That's true. That's what happened. That's what I was told on the phone. that people were going to be filing records requests for me, and that it was going to be encouraged, and that Mr. Tavares was going to go to the select board meetings and speak about me and about my lies. He also said that, quote, up to now, I've never bothered you. And I said, what do you mean by that? You mean I've done something in the past where you could have bothered me or arrested me or something? Yeah, he said, I saw your truck and the inspection sticker was expired. And I could have towed it for safety reasons. You were parked at a meeting. I said, oh. I thought to myself, gee, is that the normal response that the police give? Do they go around looking for expired? All they have to do is punch a plate in and they get a full readout of what the status is of your registration and inspection. That to me is a threat. Implying that he had let certain issues of possible legal violations by me slide. He said that I should get prepared to deal with it. And that to me sounded to me like a campaign and onslaught from him against me. So I was being told to get prepared to deal with it. The records requests from citizens, and I heard a rumor that there is a certain citizen who has put in multiple records requests for me and for other people because they're looking for something. And when you look at what Steve Darcy did to the DPW and to John Cusick, asking for emails, all emails between me and Cusick, I heard earlier that there's another email request out for all emails involving me, Kelley, other people. People are digging and digging and digging. And this is what Phil Tavares said he was going to do to me. Now, Phil's, again, I understand the massive outpouring. I understand how people love him. There are people that feel that maybe they're dependent on some police largesse, or maybe a favor's been done for them, or they're just good guys, or he comes across as sincere, or he donates time to special causes. I understand all that. That's why I've never had a problem with Phil Tavares. If he does these other little things, and I've heard lots of stories. All right? And I just go, well, you know, I'm busy right now. I'm not, like I said earlier, I'm not the town ombudsman. I'm not the town watchdog. Can't go there. But other than that, I don't have a problem. Like I said, some of the people that Phil has hired or been responsible for hiring and the selectmen have confirmed or whatever, if they're officers or sergeants, a lot of good guys, from what I can tell. This is going to include regular appearances during select board. This campaign, the way I look at it, is going to include regular appearances during select board meetings to express his opinions and thoughts about me and what he calls my lies about him. All of this seems based on what Tavares claims are false statements made by me about the personal or professional behavior of him and others in relation to incidents that I was involved with in Marshfield in 2010, including the court times, and Pembroke in 2016, where he claims he did his own check and found that a gun was never pulled on me because he has still pictures, which I believe was supplied by Matt McDonough, who was at the mobile gas station across the street from where I was protesting against Hillary Clinton, the murderer or murderess, when she was running for president. A despicable human being in my eyes. And because I'm kind of familiar with some of the foreign policy issues around that she was involved with, I felt it was my duty to protest, and I did political theater. But Phil said, I have still pictures, which I believe was supplied by Matt McDonough. All right, Matt McDonough is part of the team. All right, and an investigation by Phil. And then he said during the hearing on Monday that person was there in the audience. And if you want to hear from her, she'll come to the microphone, which is prohibited under this executive session procedure. And his mentor, Billy Sullivan, was there. He's ready. All these people hooting and cheering and whistling and clapping. and brought in the brass, brought in the Fraternal Order of Police, I think it's their chief counsel, brought in all the heavy hitters. This is deeply disturbing behavior, and I request immediate action by the Select Board to have Chief Tavares cease and desist from his intimidation tactics and threats. Was it my choice the way the Select Board and Town Administrator were going to handle this? Nope. I had to get it on record. Imagine yourself in my position. You've got somebody that is beloved, idolized, almost worshipped, relied upon for so much, and something like this happens to an individual. Wow. It's like, wow, if something happens to me, no one's going to look at him for a suspect. I mean, all these kinds of crazy thoughts go through your mind. I don't know if they're really crazy, but all kinds of thoughts go through your mind like, wow, what is this? This picture doesn't match this picture. Wow, am I missing something here? So to protect myself, or anybody would have to protect himself to do this. That is the genesis of the session on Monday, not what I said on this show. And that's how the session proceeded on Monday. When Phil Tavares said, this is not about me. This is about Joe and his propensity to lie. Lie, lie, lie. His propensity to lie. And his crime of accusing public officials. And his culpability, well, he didn't use culpability, but Joe is responsible for people losing faith in government. That was the message. I'm responsible for the fact that if you look at any survey, like 12% of the population trusts the government now. That's Joe's fault. The Karen Reed trial, the Sandra Birchmore case in Stoughton, Canton, that's Joe's fault. It's not the fault of scumbags in government that are everywhere, in all departments, at all levels, taking advantage of the situation. I know a little bit about that. I grew up in a very, very political family in Boston. Whoa, what an education. I wouldn't say my family was political, but there were a lot of activities and connections. We all know it. We all know about it. It's nothing new. I always say Howie Carr has the easiest job in the world. There's so much low-hanging fruit to hit when it comes to writing stories and talking about stuff. Now, I have a clip which I'm not going to be able to play because my show is just about over, and I apologize, folks, because I do tend to sometimes ramble a bit. But I do have a clip of that meeting on Monday. And one part of it that I wish I could have played, but I'm running out of time, is when Trish Simpson says, I think what we should do is issue a letter, or like a warning letter, saying to Phil Tavares that maybe you shouldn't have handled it the way you did. And his response is, that's completely unacceptable. Now, he's telling the board what to do. And that's just for starters. There's so much more. Watch it yourself. It's available on YouTube, Marshfield Community Media Government on YouTube. Watch it yourself. Let me know what you think. Thank you for listening. My apologies to everybody that got bent out of shape, but it had to be done. Good night, everybody. I'm Joe Pasevich, and have a wonderful 4th of July. I love you all. Good night.